Tonight, we've got our guest speaker, Peggy Garnes. And I'll tell you a little bit about Peggy from what I know of her. I can go on my whole report here. But Peggy is currently the president of the Ohio State Beekeepers Association. And she's been keeping bees for a little over 20 years, probably, or a little longer. She usually operates with around 140 hives or a little more. And she raises queens and builds nucs. And she does a lot of teaching. She teaches a lot of different Zoom presentations like she's going to do tonight. And she's taught for different groups in Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania. She's quite well known around the state and the surrounding states. And I think we'll enjoy her presentation tonight. She told me it was about a 45-minute presentation, and then she'll have some questions and answer some questions that anybody might have. And we'll open the doors and let it go at that. Peggy?
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we are going to, okay, so do you guys see that?
Yeah, looks good.
Not yet, or no?
Yes,
yeah?
Yes, we do.
Okay. We'll see how this is going to work. So thank you, Tom. That was very kind of you. Very nice, kind words. You know what? At the end of the day, I'm just the beekeeper. Just like you guys. No different.
Hey, Peggy, can I interrupt you just for a second before you start? Do we have your permission to record any of this?
What are you going to do with it?
Well, just keep
sure.
it
Yeah.
We're not going to do anything else with it. No.
Sure. Go ahead. That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is kind of squirrely because I have two monitors, but you're on the other one. So I can't, where are you at? Let's turn you this way so I can look what we have. So that's going to go next. So anyway, this was a picture the other day and it was like so bizarre. I had to take a picture of it. It was like, what is happening? Is the place on fire? But no, it was actually the sun coming up. We haven't seen the sun in like 9 days. So I ran out and quick got a picture. Might not see it again for another 9 days. This is a picture of some nucs that are out in a field. These are styrene ones with a windbreak. And so when Tom called and asked if I could talk about splits and nucs, I said sure, because like I'm a big nuke person. Every year probably I put into winter probably about 65 nucs at least. Last year we put in 65. I lost 2, and a lot of times they get through winter a lot easier than the big hives do. And they're just sitting out just like that out in the field. So tonight as we go, I guess my first question is going to be is how many people, what's the length of time for the beekeepers here? Like under 5? Is everybody like an under 5? You know what I could do is like open all these pictures up. You can see everybody then.
Yeah, everybody's muted.
Okay. Okay, so everybody's kind of like, yeah, under 5, so kind of basic. Okay, good. And I think what might be easier, since there's not that many of us, is that if you have a question, either you can do on the bottom of your bar, raise your hand, or, you know, unmute yourself and say, hey, question, and we'll stop because then we can talk about it while we're working on that slide. So let's go to the next one. Too much animation here. So splits. It depends how you look at a split. If it happens in nature, Mother Nature did it, we call it a swarm. If we do it on purpose, then it's called doing a split. And a lot of times when we do the splits, we do it just so that we can control them so they don't swarm. Or if you have to increase, or if you need to control something like there's too many swarm cells and you want to do a shook swarm and catch them before they take off on you. So that's kind of where we're going to start with. So as new beekeepers, I guess first you want to decide why you want to split. Are you wanting to control so your hives don't swarm? Or are you wanting to get extra bees to have more bees going into winter? If you're the person, the beekeeper that is doing this, is keeping bees for honey, then don't split in the spring until after the honey flow. That makes sense, right? I mean, if you split and split your force down, everybody in the separate boxes has to regroup and you don't have that workforce out there collecting nectar and pollen. So if you're going to be splitting in the spring, wait until the nectar flow, collect your honey. After you collect it, then you're going to split. Treat if you have a mite issue, and then bump them back up, and then you should be able to catch either your late summer flow or your fall flow. I usually split at least twice a year, minimum. I wait till I get my spring flow so I can collect that honey. And then I do splits, and then those go to the out yards if they need to have more population. These pictures that we're looking at here, the one at the top, can you see my little cursor there? Mm-hmm. This one was at the end of March. Okay, now I'm one of those little beekeepers that the first weekend in March, I'm hanging pollen outside. I'm pretty much lateral with you guys. I'm about 45 minutes south of Cleveland. So we got a good dumping of snow last night, and they said like we're supposed to get like another 2 to 4 tonight. This picture was taken right at about the end of March. That's a double deep, 10 frame. I'm old school, I'm 10 frame. So if you open that hive at the end of March and that's what it looks like, you are going to have bumper workforce to collect honey in the spring. So I'm a queen excluder person also. And so I would check my bottom box, make sure that, they're working both boxes. If they're all in the top box, then I'm going to reverse them. All right. That's going to slow down any thoughts of them wanting to leave. So if they're all in the top box, that's going to be reversed so that empty bottom box is going to come up to the top. We're going to put a queen excluder on it. And then I usually do 2 honey supers at a time. I would rather have more space for them in the spring because we don't have a small hive beetle problem then than to put on one and we get the basswood comes in crazy and then they run out of room and then they swarm. So, and it always looks bad when they swarm at my house. It's very embarrassing. The other picture down here is a 8-framer that I had. And I don't care for 8 frames much because they chimney up too fast and they don't seem to have as much storage room. So are there a lot of 8-framer people here tonight? No? Are you guys 10 frames? One 8-framer? Okay. I'll try not to say real bad things then for the 8-framer people. But anyway, so go back to the summer one. After the summer solstice, which is June 21st. So those queens that are developed then have a real urge to build up for winter. You're going to get a better queen, in my opinion, if you're making your own queens for your splits. Plus, we got tons of drones then that are walking around. These are good, healthy, fat drones. You got lots for her to mate with. Where if you split in the spring, you may have an issue trying to find queens. Or if you want to make your own queens, you may not have enough drones available. So we're going to talk a little bit too about, making the splits actually and when to be doing that. So do we have any questions on this one slide? Don't be bashful. Tom will tell you. You can ask me anything. So anyway, so again, why do we want to be thinking about it now? Well, you got to be prepared. I wish that more beekeepers were proactive rather than reactive. Again, when the honey flow is on and it's just edging out, that's the most natural time for Mother Nature to say, you know what, there's lots of resources. It's time to recreate, have another group of bees. So that's their normal time to want to multiply. Plus you've got lots of resource. Everything's blooming, everything's coming in, you got tons of pollen, and the pollen is what you need to raise better queens. It's all about the protein. That's what gives you those big, fat, long, beautiful queens. If you're gonna split in the spring, when there's nectar and pollen coming in, you don't have a robbing issue. And there's a slide that'll come up that's not going to show robbing, but it's going to address that when you start splitting a hive, we don't have the people, you don't have the hive available, this resource bees like the guard bees to protect that entrance. So then you don't want to start robbing. Again, we just talked about that. If you're going to split, you have to have drones walking, not in purple-eyed stage, because we all know up here in Ohio, up where we're at, up in this higher part, that we could have a couple beautiful days in March and April, and then it goes down to 20 at night. Well, we all know as beginner beekeepers under 5 years that the drone brood is on the peripheral of the brood nest. So sure enough, when there's a cold snap and they cluster up, who gets sacrificed? The guys on the edge, that's your mating group for your queen. So you want to make sure you have drones out walking. The other thing is, how many of you know that you got to have at least 50 degrees at night for those nurse bees to make wax? Best temperature is 70. They will struggle and produce wax at 50, but not as readily as they should. So again, if you start thinking of splitting, or you split when the nights are still at 50 degrees, you're fighting yourself. You're trying to make the bees do something they really don't want to do. A lot of times too, people will tell you that, oh, you have to have it a certain temperature at the day. The day isn't as critical as at night, because at night they will cluster up to keep everybody warm. So watch your night temperatures when you're trying to decide when you want to split. And the fun thing about Nucs is you can stack those little suckers up and they just go boom, boom, boom. They keep building and building and just keeps going. Jackie, you had a question? You have to unmute yourself, hon.
Okay, at the beginning, when you said about the top box, if all the bees were at the top box and you swap that box to the bottom.
Correct.
Do you treat your hive when you do that?
You mean for mites?
Yeah.
Shame on you. You shouldn't have any mites in the winter. You shouldn't be growing mites. You'd want to look your drop board, your pull-out tray, to see if you have any mites that are dropping off. In the spring, you shouldn't be having any. So if you're going to treat, you're going to treat before you reverse that.
Okay.
A lot of times in the spring, I believe the people are using like Apivar. Does anybody use Apivar?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And that's when they usually do it. Tom, is like in what, end of March, early April?
Yes.
So again, Jackie, you'd want to make sure, one, if you have mites, definitely clean it up, because you don't want to be splitting and spreading mites around. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So hit it with your Apivar. And then I think it has to be left on for several weeks. And then after that, then you would be doing your split or your reversal. All right. Sometimes on reversing though, you have to make sure that that bottom box is empty, because you don't want to break the cluster. If they're working both boxes, you have brood in the top and brood in the bottom, you're not going to reverse. I made that mistake a couple times. when I was starting out keeping bees, because they kept saying, oh, if they're up there, you got to reverse. And I would have some cluster in that bottom box. Well, what happens when you reverse? That little bit of cluster is at the top now with no one to keep it warm. And then they just died. So
I just asked because I know there are some beekeepers out there that will treat all year. I mean, there's people that'll treat in the winter, they'll treat in the fall, maybe midsummer. I mean, just depends on who you talk to. So just,
yeah, it's all over. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about that coming up, because again, for me, a lot of my focus now is on raising bees. And if you're going to raise bees, and I'm sure Dr. Stone would agree with me, that you want bees raised in the cleanest wax that you possibly can. So we don't do chemicals here. We never have. And out of, say, anywhere from around 80 hives, we may lose 5 a year in the winter. So it's a lot more work not doing chemicals, but that's a different story. That's another talk. That's a different talk. So anyway, so start thinking now about doing your splits. You know, if you're keeping good records, you know how that hive was producing. Was it always carrying a high mite load? Did you have to try to treat that hive all the time? If you did, okay, those aren't good bees to be hygienic enough to deal with some mites. So you want to pick the hive that has low mite loads. I like to make sure they're very gentle. And I spelled that wrong, didn't I? Yeah. So you want to make sure that the bees are very gentle. And that's, you know, like this time of the year, on a nice day, I go in there and open the top up to check for feed and things like that. They can bubble up, but I don't want anybody coming out. They can come up and look, and that's it. Then everybody has to go back down. I also look for the ones that are overwintering normally, considerate overwintering, that they're very conservative on their stores. I want a tight cluster, almost to the point that you think, oh gosh, they died. But then, you know, another month or on a warm day, they break cluster and they're up moving. So you want to make sure that they know how to overwinter. And for those that want the honey producers, did they produce? They want to produce excess, not just enough for them to keep consuming, and then you don't get anything in the fall. Okay, so pick your hive, pick your girls carefully. So the hives also that were your problem child last year and you had to limp them along through the winter, put a little X on those. That's going to be a donor hive. You're going to use that hive for resource. Then the next thing we're going to talk about is equipment. Whether you're 10 frame, 8 frame, or 5 frame, they all are going to have to be managed. More than likely, they're all going to have to get split. When I do my splits, I like to use new frames. It's a great time to get new comb brought in. I've over the years changed some of my thought pattern on culling comb. I'm old school. I've done this 20 plus years. And back then we were always told that every 3 to 5 years we had to change out frames. Well, sometimes the bees are still using it and it may be kind of disgusting looking, but they're still using it. And then there may be frames that are looking brand new with brand new comb that they won't touch. Those are the frames that you've got to get rid of because they know better than we do. They're contaminated. So when you're doing your splits, make sure you have new frames to replace what you're going to cull out. And then we just talked about picking donor hives. A lot of times too that you're going to look for who you want to make queens out of. And then you also want to pick out the hives that you want to make the male side of the equation, the drones. So those are donor hives that you're going to use for resource. Not that there have been, you know, not producing hives, but these are the ones that have the good genetics that are low mite loads, both the queen and the drone side. And again, for me, they have to be really gentle. And in this picture, you're going to see is, this is one of the out yards that I have. So you see over here on this one, that's definitely going to be the hive that we're going to use to pick the queen cells out of. What I like to do is force them to push, if it's an out yard, I'll either bring queen cells with me, or if I'm going to force her to make queen cells, I'll pull her out. And see how they're bearding all over the place? You can come back in like 5 to maybe 8 days, check them again the next week, make sure they're building lots of nice cells. And then on day 10 is then cut them out and move them into the hives that you're doing the splits on. Okay, so that's my queen one. All right, because you can see there's 2 deeps, honey super, well, I'm sorry, 3 deeps and a honey super. So she's really going gangbusters. Plus we're gonna have extra brood here for our split. This is gonna be the hive that I'm gonna use to force for drones. All right, so I'm gonna put, because she's got, this hive has 2 deeps, 2 honey supers. The reason we're going to force it for drones because it's doing everything that it's supposed to be doing. Nice traffic flow, honey production. How I force them for drones is I'll give them like 2 frames of that green drone comb. You've seen that, kind of tells them ahead of time to make drones. And then if you look at this hive in the middle, okay, we're going to tear that one down for resources, for the cat brood and stuff. Because if these hives here, this one is at 3 deeps and a honey super, this is 2 deeps, 2 honey supers. The best this one can do is 2 deeps and 1 honey super. Okay, that tells me that's an underperformer. We don't want that in the program. So we're going to split this one up for resources. Does that make sense? We're going to tear it up and take all the brood away. And then we will also, we'll leave some here. We'll leave a box with some brood because we're going to get all that workforce coming back, but we're going to take everything out of the inside, just about all of it. So, okay, Dale. I see Dale has his hand up.
Could you elaborate on the green comb? I'm not familiar with that.
Sure.
You said something called, about the drones and green comb.
Right. It's called a green drone comb, actually. And it's like a self-stamped for drone size, so that it kind of gives the hive a predisposed idea, oh, we should make this into drones. And it's green colored, so it sticks out.
This is a frame that has it on it?
Pardon me?
This is a frame that has that on it?
Yep. Yep. And it's bright green colored.
Okay.
I think I might have a picture of it coming up. But you're going to put it on the peripheral of the boxes. So like if you're running 10 frame, and actually you were the 8 framer, right? Yep, you were the 8 framer. So on frame 2 and 7, that's where you would put those frames, those green drone comb, because it's outside the cluster and the queen will be more likely to wanting to raise drones on the outside. And that's all it is. It'll give you about 6,000 drones per frame. So that's a lot of boys.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but it comes like that. Okay, so again, I'm old school, 10 frame. So we have, what are you gonna need? A lot of us probably have screen bottom boards. I like them for my big equipment because I can slide those plastic trays in the winter to keep them kind of warm. And that it's also a real nice way to check for mites, see what's getting dropped down. There are a lot of people now that are changing back to solid ones, that they're finding that sometimes there's better airflow with solid ones. When I do splits, I like to put my split in a clean box or a new one. If it's a used one, I scrape all the propolis out of it, make sure it's nice and tidy looking. I give them a nice inner cover that doesn't have any kind of mold or creepy stuff on it, and a clean lid. You're going to need to feed them some pollen patty and some 1-to-1 sugar syrup. And the reason I say that is because when you split all this up, you may not have a lot of guard bees or foragers there. So rather than force those nurse bees for those first couple weeks, you want them raising young, making wax, tending to the queen or the queen cell. If you don't give them pollen and nectar, the sugar syrup, they have to change their position in there and become a forager. So now you're going to sacrifice a little bit of feeding and healthier young by making them have to go look for food if you don't give it to them. So always when you do your split, give them pollen patty and give them a 1-to-1 sugar syrup jar. If you're doing 10 frame 1 and 2 and 9 and 10, make it capped honey. When you're tearing apart that, remember we saw that picture for that one that had the 2 deeps and the honey super? When you tear it apart, 1 and 2 and 9 and 10, make it capped honey. That way, 1, it's going to help heat the hive up during the day and radiate the heat back in at night. And then 2, if push comes to shove and they're really hungry, now they've got honey. And it just gives them a good start. And then you're going to have your new frames with foundation to fill in any gaps that we don't steal from the other hives. And I like to put my inner cover on and then put a feed box above. I'm not a big proponent of feeding outside the hives other than early spring when there's a nectar flow on. So I like to hide the food inside the box, that 1-to-1 sugar syrup, and I've got some pictures of that coming up to talk about. And when you do a big split on either 10 frame or 8 frame, you got to kind of watch it pretty careful because they'll blow those up really fast. So you have to watch that you get your second box on in time so they don't swarm, because then didn't you kind of defeat the purpose? When I do that, do you see the next sign also?
Yeah.
I can't get it to do it on this side. I'm not sure why it won't do that. Okay, so equipment for Nucs. Again, I love Nucs. They are, I don't think that we take them serious enough, but if you think about it, the way that they're built, if you do 5 frame deeps and do like 2 high, that's almost perfect bee space like they would find in a tree. And that we're kind of mimicking nature. But anyway, okay, solid bottom board. I think if you're going to do Nucs, you got to do solid. They will learn to correct the ventilation part for you. And this picture here is a solid bottom that has a piece of wood that goes all the way down here. So you can put your 2 Nucs side by side, and then that way they share that heat wall. And we're going to talk about that coming up. These are migratory lids. This was a picture in the summer. You can see the size of my weeds. But this was a picture in the summer. And because these are painted flat black, it was really hot for the girls. So I gave them a little towel, a little white towel to help kind of shield it a little bit. It's been embarrassing. People have come over. I've actually had like little umbrellas shading them. So you never know what you'll find here. But anyway, these are migratory lids so that they fit going this way, up and back, so you can butt them together. And I just make them out of 2x10, and that works really good. All right, so we got a couple more hands up. Dale, you're up again. What you got?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
Is my hand still raised?
Yeah, you got your hand up.
Okay.
And then Jackie.
Okay.
Now, when you put your cloth over the top of your hives like that, do you have them like damp or anything to cool them?
No, just something light colored. And it can be like, you know, either old white towels or an old sheet, something like that. We're going to talk a little bit coming up on why they're in the full sun. And again, because of where I'm at, it's cold a lot longer at night up here. So we want them to get as warm as they can during the day. And the migratory lids, if you're going to make your own, get it by that 2x10, because then you get that natural insulation. Paint it flat black. This time of the year, they love it, that it's flat black. Maybe not so much in the summer, but you can always tip it up to give them more ventilation, cool them off. Again, we talked about the pollen patty and why, because you don't want them having to go out and find their food. Put it in there. For me, when I do the splits with the Nucs, I put the drawn foundation in the bottom and empty foundation in the top, and they will draw it out super fast. It's crazy. And again, a feed box, just because we don't want them having to go find food elsewhere. So when you're looking at tearing your hive up, you know, that donor hive that was the underproducer, this is what you're going to need to be looking for to make up your split. First of all, you got to have healthy bees. Jackie, you talked earlier about mites. Yeah, we want to make sure that you are mite free before you're doing your split. Because of course mites carry virus, so you don't want to be spreading cooties around your apiary. You also don't want any nosema. Tom, didn't you say you guys do like nosema workshops or something where you look at them?
We're gonna do one this year, but no, we have never done one. I've done them here at home.
Okay. You might even get Dr. Stone to help with the slides and the cover slips and things like that, because it's really a lot easier than you think. I've got some really good slides I'll send you about how to do a nosema workshop. And for one of your meetings, everybody meet out in the yard, bring, 50 bees and, a baggie and a little paper cup and squish them up, and everybody makes their own slide, checks it under the microscope. It's a nice way to kind of get a feel of nosema loads in the area. So again, we don't want nosema. Over the years that I've done this, I have really found if you can keep the gut of your bees a little more acidic, you tend to not carry nosema loads. I can't see Dr. Stone's face, so I can't see if he's nodding or shaking his head like, uh-oh, crazy girl. But it's interesting that they've even come out now. One of the products that I've used in the past was Hive Alive, and it has it had a seaweed base, so it was a little bit more acidic. We'll talk about that a little bit more too, because I am a big proponent of adding stuff to your sugar syrup. It's the equivalent of us taking a multivitamin every day. Can't hurt. So anyway, so you're going to have to do, when you do your split, you're going to have some type of a queen in there. You can either buy a queen that's mated, which if you're going to do real early splits, which I don't recommend because your night temperatures are too cold, you can do a virgin queen, which are usually pretty readily available in April. But again, got to have drones walking. Remember, we talked about that earlier. You get a cold snap at night and it kills all the guys, you're not going to get that queen mated well. She may mate, but those are the ones that get superseded quickly then. Or a queen cell, where if you push that, remember I showed you that big queen hive that we said we're going to push from her? Take the old queen out, move her with one frame of cat brood to a tiny nuke box somewhere. And then that great big hive is going to make some beautiful cells. And those are the ones you're going to pick out and use as your emerging queen cell, because that hive has already proven itself that it's a good quality hive. It's an excellent honey producer, manages mites well, and overwintered well. So that would be the one that you don't have to learn to graft. You don't have to do anything except take the frame that's got the old queen on it, move her to another box. Okay, the next one is really important. You want 2 frames of dark cat brood. And the reason I say dark cat brood, because those are going to be emerging soon. They're going to be hatching soon. And as you remember, the nurse bees, those first couple days, they're cleaning cells. The next couple days, they're taking care of any young that's around, which you don't have any. And then they are wax producers. So they're going to be the ones that are going to be taking care of those frames of foundation, making wax. And then they're also going to take care of that queen, whether it's a new queen, the virgin queen, getting her settled in her new digs, or helping that new emerging queen come out and taking care of her till she goes out to get mated. The 2 frames of the dark cat brood, you're going to go ahead and when you take it out is don't shake them loose or anything. Anybody that's stuck on that frame is a nurse bee. So you're going to move that one along with it. So 2 frames, a dark cat brood with the adhering bees. And I have a picture coming up that's going to show you what's a sensible size split for a 5 frame with 2 frames of dark cat brood with adhering bees. You're going to want to give them a frame of nectar and pollen. There, you got them. Okay, so with the frame of nectar and a pollen is that, you know, you gave them pollen patty, you're giving them a sugar syrup jar, but what if they're so young they don't know they have to go upstairs to eat? They have to go above. They're bred to go right next door. So if you give them a frame of nectar pollen right next to where they're emerging, that's kind of a little bit more of insurance, a little bit instant food. And then 2 frames of foundation, because when those 2 frames of dark cat brood emerge, they need something to do. They're going to be producing wax. Don't waste it. Let them go ahead and start pulling out frames. So if you count it up, 5 frames. Perfect size for a nuke. Okay, so do we have any questions on that one? Dr. Stone? No?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So people always ask me, so what's the best environment for a nuke? I tell them full sun. Because if you think about it, the queen's got to be kept, what, 90 degrees? Right? We don't get all that much sun up here in the northern part of Ohio, especially with us being up closer to the lake. So full sun. Don't put them under the trees. Don't do anything like that. That's crazy. I also like to make sure that they're close to water when you're doing your splits. I have a picture coming up too. This picture here is, this little gravel is around one of the ponds. So they're right on the pond. All they have to do is fly out maybe 10 feet. There's the water. And then there's the grass behind them that I mow. Right behind them, no one even comes out to look. So you're gonna feed them sugar syrup and pollen patty. We already talked about that. Small entrance. If you look at this picture, I just chopped these up in my husband's wood shop. See, they've got what, not even a ½ inch. Again, because you're taking those 2 frames of dark cat brood and the adhering bees, are you picking out anybody who's a guard bee? No. Are you picking out anybody that wants to be a forager? No. You want everybody that's staying in here to be a nurse bee and stay in there. If you notice too, the inner cover, it's flipped up. It's easier for them to defend that, because if anybody tries to get in there, they have to enter and then climb all the way across the inside of that nuke to get down in the hole to do any damage. So they're not going to be bothering that one. Again, a small entrance. When you go to do these guys for overwintering, take that ½ inch hardware cloth and fold it in half. And I stuff that in the door. This whole bottom part here is ½ inch hardware cloth. And then I put my little piece of wood back to block the wind. Because mice can do some damage. And even in the fall, I tell people that I mentor up by me is that Labor Day weekend, mouse guards go on. Because especially for these little hives, they have nobody to protect them. And again, mice are really disgusting. The next part is keep it ventilated. This is a solid bottom board, but they have their little ventilation here. They have their ventilation hole here. And on the really hot days is I just tip that up a little bit. Just raise it up and push it back a little so it sits on the top edge of the nuke box. And if you are using a screen bottom board, I push it all the way in except for an inch. And then again, that kind of helps with the ventilation part. But full sun, full sun.
Peggy, is your sugar syrup in that top box?
Yes.
Is that what's okay?
Yeah, I've got a picture coming up on that because like this time of the year, I'm gluing popsicle sticks together and I have nothing to do. 3 popsicle sticks glued together is perfect bee space. You can get little twigs from outside and stuff like that, but they normally end up getting trashed then at the end of the year. Where the little popsicle sticks, I just throw them in a little container, use them next time. So next we're going to talk about have a plan. And that's really important. I think we need to teach that more rather than, again, being reactive to situations that my hive just swarmed. Now what do I do? How do I go catch it? Yeah, if you can head it off and not let them swarm, preempt that cause. So again, have a plan. I think the big thing is, where are you going to put that split? A lot of times when I'm very fortunate, I have 4 out yards. I sit here now and say I'm very fortunate. When it's like in July and it's hot and I got to travel all over in 3 different counties, then I'm not so happy with it. But decide where that split's going to go. Most of my splits stay in their same yard. Old school tells you you have to move them 2 miles away. No. As long as you adjust for the foragers to go back to the parent hive, you're okay. A lot of it though is going to depend on, are you going to feed them enough or how far do they have to go for food? So we'll start with this picture here. Again, here's the pond. We have 2 giant ponds on the property. So I don't have to worry about my girls going to bother my neighbors. And we're going to give you the secret brick story. So anybody on the call, if you let the brick story out, we'll have to come and find you and kill you. Don't, just kidding. Okay, so let's start with this one here. This is the donor hive. It was 2 deeps, got a little out of control. Basswood was coming in. You'll know this is late spring. So the basswood was coming in. She backfilled too fast and they started making some swarm cells. So it's like, plan B, bad beekeeper. So plan B. So what I did is I took the queen out of this one with 2 frames of dark cat brood and put her right next door. Okay. So I artificially swarmed that hive. I beat him to the punch. So now with her over here, and notice there's no brick there because when there's no brick on it, that means there's a queen in there. So this hive here has all the extra protein, the pollen, tons of carbohydrates, the nectar, because that's what caused the problem. And now that I took the queen away, they're going to build a ton of queen cells. All right. And so then what I did from there is after they started developing the queen cells, 1 cell went over here, hence the brick in the center. That means that there's a queen developing. And then I took another queen cell frame and put it over here. Pick through the queen cells, the swarm cells. Pick out the best of the best. You want them at least 2 inches long. All right, anything under that, just nick them out. Leave just the best of the best. So anyway, so out of this double deep, this will repopulate their self. I have a queen out of the same one over here developing. This is the old queen, and this is another nuke, and all of these are same mother. Does that make sense? Okay, when we do the splits here, we're going to give them enough nurse bees to sustain themselves because we don't want them turning into foragers or having to be guard bees. This here, you see this piece of wood has carpet tack nailed to it facing up. Because these hives are on the ground, they're going to be a little more susceptible to raccoon and skunk. But I found that if I nail the carpet tack, the tack side up, they only step on it once or twice and they don't come back again. Put a game cam up. They always have that shocked look on their face when they step on that. So that stops that, but that's what that's there for. This is another one too, that this one has the old queen in it from this box. Took that out of there, put her in here, and again, hence, no brick on top, but the old queen is down here. With the cells from this one, I put a cell in this one, cell in this one, and this one is going to requeen itself. And if you notice, the brick is in the center of the top of the box. The reason I end up doing the brick system, usually I just carry my marking pen around and I write on them. But a lot of times it's quicker just to put the brick there. And I can stand up at the house and look out over all these nukes and know exactly what's going on. And I know exactly who I need to be looking in. So does that make sense on this pile here? You guys are way too easy. Okay, so this is another fun picture here. Obviously, this is my donor hive. These are 8 frames. Where'd Dale go? There he is. There you go, Dale, 8 frame. And this is why I don't care for this one. She builds this up like crazy. It's hard to keep her out. And this is in an out yard, which makes it even more difficult. Usually on this is when you get the call and say, I think your bees are in the tree. And it's like, I'll be right there. But what I do on this one is when I do my split, they could just go right next door. And you'll see that when I put these in here, I did a little heavier split because she had way too much going on in here. So this got 3 frames of dark cat brood with the adhering nurse bees on it. All right, so they got put in that one. And there was a queen cell on it. So then I took 3 more frames of dark cat brood out of this one, put it over here with the adhering bees. So the reason that you're looking at this picture here, see this mess here? This is all of the foragers that are going back to the old hive, to the original hive, all right? So these were in this hive. So tomorrow I would have to go back and make sure I have enough workforce left. See where these guys are kind of hanging around? They're nurse bees. They've never been out of their hive before. You know, now all of a sudden, mom's gone, it doesn't smell right, and everybody that was bringing us food just left. So again, you're going to have your feed box up here. The pollen patty is going to be under your inner cover, right above the cluster, right above that dark cat brood and the queen cell. On this one, I did bring queen cells out with me. So the queen cell was hung right in the middle. Right above it was the sugar syrup 1-to-1. You can be a little bit less if you have a lot of foundation for them to draw. You're better off with like 40%, 35% sugar, a little bit higher on the water side. It mimics nectar more from nature, and they will use it, they'll consume it faster, kick it back out as wax. But again, notice you don't have anybody here at the door. Remember we talked about there's no guard bees. So there's nothing there to protect the entrance. These guys are just coming out trying to figure out what happened. This is all the foragers that got moved when the split was made. And this one, there's just a few of them peeking out up here. If you make your splits during the day when all the foragers are gone, the only people that are left at home are the queen and the nurse bees. So on hot day, pick the hot day that you can between 11 and 2. So the heat of the day, then go do your split because all the foragers are gone. So you know whoever you're transferring is going to stay put. That makes sense? Okay. Any questions? Okay. The next one is a walkaway split. And when I first started beekeeping, you were very much frowned upon if you did walkaway splits. It was like, that was like the lazy way to do it. And it was very frowned upon. Well, you know, really at the end of the day, it depends on why you're doing the split. If you're trying to make your hives make a lot of honey, you're not going to split until after the nectar flow is going on. And then you've got this big volume of bees in this hive from the honey flow, split it then. I've done that in out yards where there'll be like 2 deeps high, just packed with bees. And all I do is just crack the boxes in half, take the top box, move it over one. The majority of the bees are going to go to where the queen is. But the nurse bees, because they've never been out of the hive, they're not going to abandon their brood. They're going to stay put. I give each one a pollen patty, just in case whoever doesn't have the queen, the foragers are going back next door to where she is, but those nurse bees have ample protein there to develop a beautiful queen. There's still a ton of bees in there. They're not going to go anywhere. So again, I don't see any problem with walkaway splits. They're very economical. They're cheap. They're very quick. You just pop the hives, separate them, put them on a clean bottom board, give them a clean inner cover, put the brick to the end because you really don't know what's going on either of them. By the next day, you can go back and lift the lids on them and you'll know right away who has the queen. Because the hive that you open up, that they come bubbling up and it's really loud, okay, she's not on that side. And you go open the one right next to it, the original one, maybe, you open that hive up and it's going to be nice and quiet and calm, just like it always is. So you know the queen is in that one. The pros of this is that's a kick butt hive. I mean, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. Excellent pollination, excellent honey production. It's good genetics. Why would you not want to propagate that? A lot of people aren't, anybody here a grafter? Anybody graft queens?
I do.
Yep.
When you do a walkaway split, you don't have to. Yeah, I mean, you're perpetuating that good genetic right there. Like, again, it's quick. It's an easy made queen. The nice part, in my opinion, and a pro, is you're getting a brood break. Because again, think back to the beginner class. How long does it take to make a queen? 16 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you have no brood there. After she goes out and mates and comes back, you're looking like a 2-day, maybe 3-day window there. Once she starts laying eggs, how long is it before you have babies coming out? 21 days for workers. So you, in essence, you're going to get a nice 4-week window of nowhere for mites to hide. If you have good hygienic bees, they're going to get rid of all those mites in 4 weeks. The downside, though, is if you're supposed to be making honey, you have no workforce coming up. That's the downside of it. You don't have any workforce. It's taken 3 weeks before your workforce is coming. So that's the downside. And what happens if you don't notice that maybe the queen didn't come back? That has happened. It's a lot of times in May, June, sometimes even into July, the birds are all eating. They have a lot of young to feed. Who do you think they're picking off? The slow drones and the big virgin queen, who doesn't fly so good either, on her way back. So that's the downside. But I think it's a lot of times, try it. You'll be surprised. And it's a free queen, because what are queens going for now? $45? Jackie, I see your hand is up. Oh, you're muted. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, last year, Rick and I had made some splits from our hives. We had 2 of them that we had to requeen and requeen them into a new hive box, which I'm not, a couple had also had done the same thing, and we were sharing the information, and it worked well. But on one of the splits, other than those two, we had, and they've all kind of been split from the two main hives originally, and the one is a little bit more aggressive. Is there any reason or rhyme or reason why one would be a little bit more aggressive when the genetics have been the same all the way through?
What happens, so everybody heard the question, the answer to that one, okay, the question is why out of a split, if you did like 3 or 4, everybody was great except one was like the hive from hell. What happens is you can't, even though you can control the mother genetics, the female side of it, you don't have any control over who she mates with. And you may have some tough guys in the neighborhood that she ended up getting mated to and came back and there's an attitude there. So my suggestion, one, is if you did that many splits out of 2 original ones, this year, go outside and get a different queen. You know, get something, you know, if you're having a mite issue, get something maybe a little more hygienic. You want to bring some new genetics in, and that if you're going to split this year, is use that queen then to make your cells from. And then I would definitely squish the bad girl, because that's all her. Squish her right across the top bar, put a new queen in there, and life goes on. But get her out of there, because not only are you having trouble in your yard, but you're producing drones now, sending them out for everybody else's queens to mate. And we don't want to do that either. Does that make sense? So squish her across the top bar, because that lets the whole hive know immediately something really bad happened to her. Okay, but go outside, because you don't want to keep splitting from 2 genetics, because you're going to get a bottleneck, and then you'll start getting smaller bees, and yeah, that would be bad. So go outside, get another queen from somebody else in the club, and split from there. Good question, though. I've heard that. Windbreaks. This is like some really good winter pictures for nukes. Of course, natural windbreaks are the best. This was the afternoon picture. A couple days later, we had gotten more snow. That's a deep box, and that's the lid on it. So that part about having to go dig them out, that's not true. Don't dig them out, leave them alone. But this is grapevines. We have about 100 feet of grape. So we don't trim anything until usually end of February. So they get a nice natural break there. But this is an all open field. So we try to give them a little bit of a break. I did try that straw bale thing one year. Then I just had a big stack of moldy, stinking straw bales. So the next year I tried putting them in plastic bags, and then I had stacks of stinky plastic bags full of moldy straw. So probably would not say the straw part. Fencing works good, you know, like snow fencing. This bottom picture here, this blew off the barn, and I got to it before my husband did. So I appropriated it for a windbreak and told him I don't know where it went. That worked out real good. I still use it. I painted it a different color so no one could tell. But that makes a nice windbreak for these girls. This is this field here is a north field. This is the north side of the property, and it's usually, we keep it in asters and goldenrod, that sort of thing. But in the winter it gets pretty beaten down by the deer and stuff. So that's it's a rough side for the nukes to be on. These for when you overwinter them, these are 2 Nucs side by side, butted together to share heat wall. We're going to start talking about that in a second. There's their little migratory covers, see, right together. And then I try to put like another cover. So I'm a little weird that way. I feel that the snow will melt and fall down the crack, which it never really has happened, but I sleep better at night. And that's like a deep frame or a deep lid. And you know that you've got good insulation and that they're nice and toasty in there because you don't notice any melting, do you? Especially on these with that 2-inch wood, makes a nice little barrier for them. Okay, so now we're going to talk about sharing a heat wall. Again, this is probably focused a little bit more on Nucs than other splits. But heat walls are important because if you're going to try to get those little hives through the winter, there's not that many bees in there. And we're going to be starting them, I would say, probably end of July. I start assessing the non-productive big hives, who's going to donate their resources to make up all these little guys. This picture here, these guys were started the first week of August. They're on a solid bottom board. This was the original splits. They grew into another box, and then they grew into a third box, and that's how they're overwintering. I was gonna wrap them, didn't get to that. But they're doing good. They did get then also their little mouse guard stuff. But look at the traffic. You'll notice then too, up here, the inner cover hole is facing down because when they come in and they're bringing nectar in, I like to let them come in and go right down to work because there's enough bees in here. After they get to the second box, there's plenty of guard bees. I don't worry about anybody trying to get in the bottom, including the Dobermans. They don't stick their noses there anymore either. But this way they can get through the top and scoot down. You'll notice too that these are tipped up a little bit. This fall we had some pretty warm days. So that's, if it gets too hot in there, you just have to tip it a little bit and it increases the ventilation. This is kind of like a Mike Palmer setup. This is one side of a nuke box and this is a Fowler board. So like if you don't have a lot of bees, this is like a solid frame that hangs there. So you'll put your frame of capped honey, then your 2 frames of bees, capped brood, your queen cell, and then if you don't have the extra frames, you put this and push it up against next to it, and that's where their hive stops until you can go get some more frames. This is a solid piece of wood in between, and then there's another box. It's already sitting on top of it. But this is all one piece on the bottom, solid bottom, entrance on this side and on that side. And then these are 4 framers that sit on top. That's kind of like a Mike Palmer thing. He does his that way. It's nice when you have a solid bottom like this because then the bees don't tip. You can see in this configuration, that could be a problem. You know, if there's going to be any tipping, you know, there's nothing really there for support. If this was all solid with a wood divider, oops, we went too far. Back and one more, and back. If this was all solid, it would give them more stability. All right, does that make sense? And then, all right, we talked about bumping, sharing the common heat wall. I got the next picture up. We're going to show the difference on a heat wall and a not a heat wall. If you're splitting in the spring, though, you got to be careful of your heat at night. Because if those girls have to cluster up, you know, they got to have enough bees to keep themselves warm. And this is where, if you notice too, like all the hives you see, notice that they're all dark brown. Up by us, you know, of course, if you lived in Florida, you wouldn't paint your hives brown. But up here in Ohio, I think that's what helps mine a lot because they're dark brown. They get solar gain. The little caveat on the bottom here is your common wall should be capped honey when you're starting them. And then brood, brood, and the queen's gonna go in the middle and then put a honey on the outside or a nectar. All right, we're good? These guys are way too easy. Del, I see a hand up.
Oh, I was just wondering, why would you want the common wall to be honey? Because I wouldn't that be like the warmest place?
Yep. And the reason for that is that at night when it's warm, you know, during the day, all that honey, it's like it's kind of like, it's very viscous. It's very, when it heats up, it holds the heat and then slowly radiates it back out so that they can consume it.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
And then, you know, then as they consume it, then they're going to start replacing that with brood and then moving up.
Okay.
It just gives them a warm snack at night when there's no popcorn. Okay. So here's some good examples of splits. This was one of my favorite hives. It's on the end of a row of, by one of the barns. And this is a real dark genetic and they build up like crazy. And again, for me, I build them up for the donor hives till they get 3 deep because there's a lot of bees in there, a lot. Again, there's a feed box. This one also, because of the color of the landing board, I know that this one's being used for drones production. So what happens there is these are 10 frames. So frame 2 and 9 is going to be that bright green frame for drones. And then I always, on the drone hives, always give them extra sugar syrup. I want big, fat drones and a lot of them. And so these are pushing out probably, what, 12,000 drones a week. Over here, these are real early splits. The only time I do feed outside is in early spring, you know, like maybe April through May. And then I don't feed outside anymore. The other thing for feeding outside is if you have raccoons in the area, it seems my raccoons think it's really funny to take all the feed jars out of the holders at night and roll them down to the pond and float them. So again, that's where the board comes in and you put the little carpet tacks, the little stinkers. And again, here, if you notice on the, these all have brand new queens in them because the rock is in the center. So the house is up over here. So I can be looking at this from the house and know, okay, well, this group here, they're brand new. So I check them once a week or every 5 days to make sure the queen came back, that she's laying, no issues. And again, notice the little tiny entrances, little entrances always. This is a nuke that, that was getting ready to get shipped out to another property. 5 frames. This was completely closed because we were having some little skunk issues. And, but this is how it should look. As soon as you take that cover off, I mean, you should be bursting with little bees. And so when this one got to its new home, it would automatically get a brand new box on top. And I would take one frame, the frame from probably 2, you know, because you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this frame here, not the inside one, but this frame would move up to the second box in the same position. And this empty hole here would get a frame of foundation. It makes your bees crazy not to have foundation next to their young. And that when they move them up to the top, they've got a lot of heat coming up. So that keeps those babies warm at night. But too, then again, it makes them crazy because you got foundation on this side and then the brood and then foundation. So they're going to build that out super, super fast. And then over here on this group, It's funny because a lot of people say that you can't start bees, do splits in August. These were done in August, and they grow like crazy. So again, this is a solid bottom board. This was the original split, grew into these two, and these are feed boxes for winter. This one sold the hive that was next to it, so it doesn't have a heat wall now. Notice the difference in traffic from these two that have a heat wall, so they don't have to work as hard, compared to the one that doesn't have a heat wall. You don't have near the traffic. Does that make sense? If you give them the buddy system, it's like a plus for everybody. All of mine too, that when they get ready by October, usually I'll take the inner cover off and put a shim in, and none of these have shims yet. I'll put a shim in, which is like a 2x2 little frame. Will replace the inner cover, and then the inner cover goes on top, and then the feed box, and then their lids. And the reason why I do that in like October, early November, is that if I have to get in there in winter to add extra feed in case they blow out of this food too fast, that's not the time to be cracking propolis. Does that make sense? You want to do that like in October. They're not going to propolis it back down, but that gives you the option in the winter, if you have to go in for emergency feed, if you take that lid off and look in the inner cover hole and they're all up there looking at you, you got to get food in there. So the shim is there to give you your 2-inch buffer. Where'd my camera go? There it goes. The 2-inch buffer, so you can put either the candy block in there, or I end up taking those winter patties sometimes and folding them in half and put them right above the cluster. And let me think what else. I think that's it. Any questions on that one? You guys are, Tom, this is like way too easy. Oh, Jackie, do you have your hand up, or is that from last time?
Okay, actually I have 2 questions.
Bonus round.
Okay. 1, how do you treat a flow hive? Because this is something somebody asked.
Okay.
And we wonder about it, if a flow hive can actually be treated due to the fact that you actually flow the honey right out of the hive. And question number 2, how do bees do things in the wild without being controlled or treated or anything by a beekeeper and survive for many years?
Perfect. Okay, so let's start with the first question with the flow hive. There's probably 5 people in my area that have flow hives. The biggest problem is not so much the mites, is that they're in one deep and they tend to blow out or build up, blow out and swarm. And because they don't have any queen, they have nothing to do but collect nectar and make honey. The problem with that then is after the honey flow, you are either queenless or you have like a rogue, not well mated queen. So you do still have to treat. Most chemicals that are on the market you cannot use with honey supers on. So you either have to move that contraption off the top of the hive, or make sure before you put it on starting of the honey flow that you are already mite free. So I would definitely say if there's a flow hive, treat it like first part of March, whatever the temperature sensitive is, and get yourself mite free before you put your flow hive part on. Plus, I always think put it in 2 deeps, you have more workforce, they fill it up faster. The second part of your question was about how do bees manage the mites without human intervention in the wild. They build up in their tree and then they swarm. they run out of room and they swarm. And how many weeks do you have before the new queen is producing young? You got a 4-week break. Most of the time in 4 weeks, with all the mites being phoretic, the hive manages it and chews them off. The little critters in the bottom of the tree eat all the dead stuff out, and life starts over. It's not a lot of people think it's the same bee tree that's always there. It's like an ebb and flow, that they build up, fill up all the comb, because there's only a set amount of cavity there for them to live in. And once they fill it up, then they swarm out and the whole process starts again. I think that if you have time to read that book, The Honeybee Democracy by Dr. Tom Seeley, he did a lot of work on that in the Arnott Forest about wild bees. And again, if we could mimic that more, is when they build up and after the honey is already collected, before they have a chance to swarm, you go in there and take the old queen, artificially swarm them. You kept your good girl, gave them a brood break, let them mitigate their mites. By the time that new queen comes along, they're ready to go. Does that answer your question good?
Peggy, give the name of the book again.
The Honeybee Democracy.
By Tom Seeley.
By Dr. Tom Seeley out of Cornell. That's a good one. It's a fun book to read. So here's my question page. Mostly it's to ask you guys questions, but again, this is sticking out over a dock. This is a single one. Started as 1 deep, built up to 2. This was a double on a solid bottom. This is just a lid holding its place because I sold that one. So this winter, once they hunker down and they're not flying as much, say in, I would say November, is I will pick this one up, move it over to the vacant spot, and then these two will overwinter together and share the heat wall. Okay. Again, they're on a dock, so they get tons of wind. It gets pretty crazy over there. And on this one, these guys, again, a solid bottom that they're sharing. This was the original split. They built up here, they built up here. That one stopped and they ended up building out a honey super. The Nucs are like little crazy factories. Again, if it gets too hot, see how I just prop that up? If you ever need resource for your other hives and you're running systems like this, and say you have a hive that's just off a little bit, maybe needs a little bit more workforce, you can come in here and take a frame of dark cat brood, with or without the bees, doesn't matter, just make sure you're not taking the queen. Wherever you take it out of, put a frame of foundation in it, they'll fill it out in, I'd say, 2 days. They'll have most of it drawn back out. You take that frame out of here with the extra bees and the cat brood and give it to your other hive, mist it a little bit with some sugar syrup and some Honeybee Healthy in the sugar syrup. Everybody loves nurse bees, especially when they taste good. Life moves on. They're really happy. So what kind of questions?